What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I'm your host, Mikel Dia, founder, CEO of Funnelytics, and this is the show where we have guests who help us become better marketers. Whether you're an agency owner or you're an in-house marketer, we want to level up your game, and today's guest is no different. We have Frank Pierce here, who is going to talk to us about what it takes to really go after Fortune 500 type of clients. If you're an agency owner and you're stuck in that kind of small business, ecosystem and you're trying to go up market, how do you do that? What does it take? And Frank is an expert at this. So Frank, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation because it is something that most small business, small agencies, any agency really that just gets started, you get stuck in this hamster wheel. First and foremost, let's talk about your not so humble bragging rights. Give us the highlights. Tell us about you and why should people listen to this episode?
Yeah, quickly, my background was marketing. Don't hold that against me. I went to a journalism school, but I was a three-time CMO. So I was a CMO for a NASDAQ company, a New York Stock Exchange company, and a venture-backed company in the Bay Area. So that was all the marketing side. And the marketing in it, which has a bearing on what we're talking about today, but marketing teaches you segmentation and discipline and messaging and all those kinds of things that are helpful in selling. But after really half my career in the marketing side, I went over to what I call the dark side of sales. And what's addictive about sales is you know pretty clearly whether you're succeeding or not. Marketing has a lot of assumptions and theories and things, but when you're sitting down with a client or you're on some kind of webcast, that's when you know whether all your theories about messaging and segmentation and value propositions, whether that's real or not. So I went into dark side of sales. I sold to enterprises for 19 years, data analytics and AI primarily, and things related to that. And I sold into the financial services space, all the brands that you've heard of, a lot of them out in the Bay Area and up the West Coast, and then also financial services, retail, and high tech.
Okay, so you've gone through a lot of industries, a lot of different types of businesses, and you started off as a marketer like us, and now you're on the other side, the evil side, as you call it. So take a step back and tell us a little bit about when you did that transition from the marketing side to the sales side. Did you go straight into enterprise level sales? Is that where it started for you? Walk me through a little bit of the journey.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. When I was on the marketing side, you're in a lot of sales meetings. You're supporting the sales function. You're trying to, as a team, achieve certain goals. So I certainly had exposure on that side, but I did go straight into enterprise sales to Fortune 100 companies right off the bat. And that was a little bit of a learning curve. No question about that for sure. But I think also you quickly realize there's some fundamental things that help you achieve success. And then there's a couple of things that are out of your control, and you also learn that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always a learning experience, always a learning curve, especially when you're transitioning. So if you went right into kind of the enterprise sales world, walk me through what does the enterprise sales process look like? Like what were a lot of the mistakes you made in the early days that you've now mastered? What does the playbook look like?
I'll tell you a couple of things. Number one, there was a ton of preparation, and the guys, the men and women that I learned from that were always hitting their numbers, that had high customer satisfaction, that were just doing a fantastic job, regardless of the economy and regardless of their client, were doing well. They all had one thing in common, which is they prepared a lot, right? Even for very brief interactions. And I don't mean being overly studious, but they knew the client's business in some cases better than the client did.
So before you keep going, let's dive a bit deeper into that. So when you say preparation, give me an example. Like before you would ever go into a client meeting, what are you thinking about?
It seems ridiculous, but do you know what they're solving for? And do you know, you hear that all the time in sales, oh my gosh, what is their pain point? But can you define it? Do you know what it really is? And sometimes you're talking to people and that pain point is not their problem. It's somebody else's problem. One thing is the person you're talking to solving the problem you think they're solving? And that's where I think you just have to have a lot of dialogue with the customers and talk about that. But the other thing is just research. And even on private companies, you can do a ton of research. I've been shocked, and this is my marketing roots with some sales peers over the years, how little information they have going into a client call. They're asking, clients don't want to be annoyed with questions that you ought to already know the answer to, right? So
That's for sure. So phase one is research, right? Okay, what's next? Okay, I go into a meeting, but I'm research. So let's keep going and unraveling this playbook.
number one, research. Number two, this is what we're expecting to talk about today. Is that good? Do they have a change that you need to take into account? But I think the other thing is really the underappreciated capability is the ability to be concise, right? Because they're having 25 people come in selling them stuff and their minds are blown and their boss is having meetings. And so if you cannot summarize really what you're talking about, the value, the topics, the issues, very concisely, you're sunk. I was in a CTO's office in California in the Bay Area, and I took a picture and sent it to some colleagues, and there was a stack of presentations, probably 2 feet deep. And I thought, okay, this is our selling environment. This guy is getting proposals from everybody in North America, right? So if we can't separate ourselves by being concise and clear, then we're not going to have a chance, right? Because this guy is just he's overloaded with information. So,
okay, so being able to create a concise kind of summary and process. So preparing first, being concise. What's next?
let me tell you one story about that just quickly. I was in a meeting in San Francisco, South Bay area, and with a CTO, and there was a room, and it had 20 MBAs on one side and 20 PhDs in decision sciences on the other side. And we were talking about all this complicated stuff around customers and et cetera, et cetera. And after 2 hours of discussion with probably literally 25 people, highly educated, the CMO looked at me and said, Frank, what does all this mean? Like he couldn't distill it down. And that's what I mean about being concise. You're taking in a ton of information, but this is my journalism background, can you write a headline? Hey, this is a headline, this is a subhead, and whatever. And if you can do that, then you're in good shape. So planning, message preparation, and just be concise. Have mercy on people. And when they tell you they have 30 minutes, they really have 15. So can you get to it?
Okay. So what's next?
I think just being persistent all the way through. I think knowing the classic, who else are you going to have to talk to? A data person, a AI person, a security person. So there's a bunch of people you have to sell, and you also have to help your stakeholder be able to carry the message for you. I have to be able to explain it to you so you can explain it to 10 of your colleagues that don't care. So I have to plant that ability for you to repeat our message to your colleagues so it can be understood. So that's a key thing. And I think the other thing that I've learned over the years, and if there's some magic capability for it, I'd love to hear it, but really the stakeholders you're talking to, how do they think? Because if I could ask one question, somebody asked me once, what's the one thing I'd like to know that I don't know? And my answer is, I'd like to know how the stakeholders think. Because some are very risk averse, some are very methodical, some of them fly by the seat of their pants, some of them love a good adventure. You need to figure out temperamentally where they are, because if you lay a bunch of facts on somebody who's got no attention span, you're dead. And counter to that, if you come in with a very quick statement or a high level view, a headline, for somebody that wants a ton of detail, you're also sunk. So I think you have to figure out, how does this person want to receive information, and how much information do they need to make the next decision?
Yeah, you have to be able to read the room, right? You have to be able to understand who your audience is across the board. And I think one of the biggest differences between selling to these large enterprise versus these small businesses is the speed in which a decision gets made, but also the amount of, like you said, stakeholders or people that need to be looped in order for this decision to be made. So how do you navigate that? How do you, in the small business world or medium business, okay, I have one person I have to speak to, and usually maybe one other decision maker in the process, and I can get an answer within 2 weeks, right? How do you navigate that? Are you thinking I'm going into this process to build a relationship and it's going to take a long time and I want to build that over time? Or what's your mentality when okay, here's this prospect, let's get the ball rolling?
I think relational is key, and a lot of that is trust. And they also, the classic thing, they don't buy from people they don't like. And the converse of that, if they do you like you, they'll cut you some slack when you need it. But I do think you have to identify logical people, right? There's a procurement guy and a security guy. And what you're doing for the stakeholder is saying, look, I'm going to pave the way for you the best I can. I'm an outsider, but I'm going to knock down these barriers for you to sales. I'm going to talk to all these people and I'm going to inform them and I'm going to win them over so that when you ask for their support, you're halfway there, right? So I think you have to talk to the broader team. Some of them are 3 minutes, and then some of them, they aren't equally weighted. In certain industries, certainly in the data side, if your chief security officer says thumbs down, you're done, right? Doesn't matter what everybody else says. If they don't feel like you're handling their data securely, you're toast, right? So there's some people that are more critical than others, but you do have to build a consensus and make sure that you're really making the job easier for your stakeholder to get the buy-in of his broader team.
And at what stage do you start thinking about closing the deal?
Really almost from the beginning. That sounds trite. And certainly your management is thinking like even earlier than that. As soon as you say somebody's name, they want to know which quarter it's going to close in and all that kind of stuff. So you just have to go down that road. But I think you hit a key thing earlier, right? Some of it is just expectations of timing. Classically, financial services is just simply not going to move fast. Tech is a little bit better. Retail really lives on 90-day increments. The decision making for retail is they can't wait 5 years to make or 3 years or 100 days to make a decision. So you just have to get in that timing and just anticipate for them. And also you need to know the buying cycle. When is their budgeting happening? Did they just create a budget or did they just close it? Did they just end the quarter or is the quarter just starting? And those are the kind of things that people ought to know going in. A lot of times people don't, and it really hurts them.
How do you uncover that? How do you know that?
You can Google a lot of that. And one thing I've learned, be really nice to the administrative assistants, because that sounds crazy, but I've sat in meetings where I heard an admin just completely shoot somebody down. Oh, no, you can't talk to the stakeholder, and the stakeholder's right there, right? But, and I've also seen things where I can't name any names, but I've had admins like sneak out documents to me. Nothing proprietary, but here's the org chart. You were asking me how the organization is, and the admin doesn't even know, but she snuck out a copy of the org chart for me and met me at Starbucks and under cloak of darkness handed me this org chart. And so that's the kind of stuff. So you're just building goodwill around everybody. And listen, nobody wants to be miserable. Nobody wants to hate their job. So the more that you can help people do their job, they're going to help you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight. Is there's people in the organization who have a little bit of access to a lot of things, right? They have their feet or their hands in a bunch of little piles. They may not have all the answers. They may not be able to make decisions and say yes or no, but ultimately they have so much knowledge that you can use that and really move that relationship forward. Walk me through, just from your perspective, as we kind of summarize here, if you were to summarize this process, this playbook into a 5-step framework or something that you would take somebody through and say, look, I'm going to teach you everything I know about sales. These are the 5 categories or 3 or 4, whatever, that we're going to dive into. What does that look like?
Prepare, get your messaging clear, tight. Don't ask the client a bunch of questions you ought to know the answer to, when the quarter ends and all that kind of stuff. Be nice to everybody. That's the guard at the front desk, all the way to the admin, all the way up to the CEO. I've been in sales calls where people trash the security guard because he was taking too long to check them in. And I thought, you just killed yourself. So all of that. And then just make sure the value propositions is clear and anticipate the headaches they're going to have and help them knock down. They're going to have to answer questions. So help answer those ahead of time for the other stakeholders so that there's low risk. People want low risk decisions. Even if the value is high, if you talk to enough people, you'll minimize the risk of the decision. And that's really what they're looking for. The other thing I would say, you mentioned early on, selling to big organizations when you're a small one. These teams are really, even in huge organizations, you might have 8 or 10 people running a huge business. So it still comes down to, pretty much everything comes down to a handful of people, no matter how big the organization is. And that's where you need to focus.
And do you have any recommendations or any tips for getting your foot in the door? Let's say I'm a software company and I just built this really cool software, or I'm an agency and I'm a really good agency and I want to get my foot in the door into the enterprise world, but I don't have my first enterprise customer. What does that look like? Is it different? Is it difficult? Do you have a slightly different recommendation, or is it basically the same thing?
It's somewhat the same, but I think people are pretty charitable. I think if you know like if you see a press release or something, or somebody at a conference that's intriguing to you and you listen, it's shocking who will respond to a message, right? If it's well done. If you're concise and you know what you're doing, they'll be gracious about that in most cases. So just understand what the person's role is, understand what they're trying to get done, and be concise. And if you do that, it's amazing how many people will raise their hand. And if it's not them, they'll say, hey, it's not me, but go talk to David or Susie or whomever, and they'll help you navigate the organization. I've had CEOs cold outreach send me over to somebody with a nice note. And these are guys I'd never talked to before.
Yeah, that's, I think that's the key, right? Is that as long as you're willing to put yourself out there, try it. Doors will open at the end of the day, and then you just have to follow the high level playbook. Frank, we like to end every one of these episodes with one question that may or may not be related to sales, may not be related to marketing, but you've been in this game long enough. You've done the marketing side, you've done the sales side. What is your number one best growth tactic that you can share with the audience when it comes to any business? You would go and say, it doesn't matter the business, this is something that I would do over and over again if I wanted to grow.
It's going to be counterintuitive. There's so much data now. Just get down to what matters, right? There's a ton of data, but get down to what helps a decision be made. And number two, I've seen this a million times, do not crush your salespeople under administrative tasks, right? Updating Salesforce and LinkedIn and CRMs, you're just draining the life out of them, and you're not going to get what they need to be doing is talking with the customer. And even if it goes badly with the customer, they're going to learn, right? So you want as much customer contact as you can possibly get.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I think many people forget that salespeople's superpower is building the relationship and having conversations. But then they're told, hey, make sure you update your KPIs and add the notes into this and update this pipeline and move this stage over to this stage and do this. And they're like, I don't want to do any of that stuff. Give them an assistant to help them with that process or something along those lines, because it is important. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be bogged down to the salesperson themselves. So thank you very much for this. This has been an insightful conversation. I really appreciate all of the knowledge that you've shared. And yeah, where can people learn more about you?
Anytime, reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's going to be the best, fastest way. And then I'll respond immediately. I'm out on that quite a bit. So
beautiful. So we'll put that in the show notes and people can find you on LinkedIn. So thank you again, Frank, for your time. I appreciate it.